Hi everybody, welcome back to the Desmond Works channel, and today we are back on with the ST2 project and hoping to get the frame and a few ancillaries bolted onto the engine. So let me take you through what I've been doing during the week. So I've done a few small jobs that I didn't think warranted filming because I didn't see the value in them, so I'll just talk you through what I've been doing, and also an update on some new bits that I'm going to need to purchase following some measurements I've done. Okay, so during the week I've fitted some of the silicone hoses and refitted the thermostat back, and I've also fitted in the manifolds for the coolant system, which weren't on there previously. Now they've got a very slight different colour to the engine itself because they were done in hammerite silver just to clean them up, and the hose between here and here is not fitted yet, this one, because you've got to get it on when the frame is in because it loops through the frame. I've also just tarted up the radiator, which is a bit of a nightmare because it was in quite heavily corroded state, being aluminium, so I will keep an eye out for a new one to replace that, but that will keep it looking pretty for now. And then the problem I found, I've just measured up the discs yesterday. They're all, well, that's bang on its minimum service thickness, but they're below by 0.1 of a millimetre. So one was 3.4, one was 3.5, and the minimum thickness is marked as 3.6. So we're going to be replacing them. And then I've had the frame out just to check it over, and it's looking really nice. So we're going to put that on in a second, and then we can start building the bike back up. So hopefully we'll be able to get into a place where we've got a rolling chassis sooner rather than later. I have painted the downpipes for the exhaust in a aftermarket very high temperature paint, so it's aluminium silver. Obviously they cure once the engine starts, so it's a bit of a hassle handling them at the moment because they tend to leach off the colour, but I didn't leave them bare because they're in quite an environment where they get quite heavily corroded, so I wanted to make sure they had some sort of cover or covering or coating to be slightly more longer lasting, and I thought I'd go for the aluminium because it looks almost like bare metal, which was what they were beforehand. And I had the wheels out just to make sure that everything was clear and ready to rebuild those, so I might do that in another video. So I've got new cush rubbers and a new full set of bearings to go in both the rear and the front wheel. And then the alternator rotation cover is not on because I'm going to order a nice little aftermarket anodized aluminium one for a little bit of bling, and I'm still waiting on the gearbox selector shaft seal, so a little bit frustrating. Okay, so let's do the first job of just dropping this frame on. So the easiest way to do it, you have to manipulate the frame in between the two throttle body inlet rubbers. So what I'm going to do is get it into there, put a bolt in so I can pivot it over onto the rear one, and then stick the second bolt in. Okay, let's do this. Okay, so the frame is loosely in place. You'll notice that once I got them aligned, I just use this as like a marlin spike to be able to take them out and grease them up, and that's just so that they're easier to take out in the future. I'm just going to quickly stick the nuts on the back of the bolts, which are these two. Okay, so the frame is now bolted onto the engine. These bolts and their nuts are done up to 43 Newton meters, so we're on. What I'm going to do now is just put in this last engine hose that needs to go through here, so let's just squeeze that in. Okay, so that hose is now on, which is the top feed to the radiator. Right, while the top here is exposed, what I'm going to do is just get the other clamp on, and then we'll stick the throttle bodies in here. Bit of an awkward fit, but it pays to get them into one hole when you're doing the throttle bodies and then squeeze them into the other. But we're now in. What I'm going to do is just do up the Jubilee clamps that hold in the throttle bodies to the manifolds. Okay, next off I'm just going to reinstall the horn back into its location. Bit of Loctite on the thread. .26 Newton meters. Okay, let's just get the last hose onto the thermostat body and then we'll get the radiator on. Fortunately, I seem to have got a damaged brand new Jubilee clip. It just won't pick up on the thread, so I need to get 2 more as I've run out. So that just helps me get the forks out of the way, off the floor, nothing more than that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to fit the head fairing on with the headlamp and everything. So as you remember, we built that up in another video, so let's get that on. Okay, there's a little bit too much powder coat build up on the frame and the actual location points for the subframe, so I'm just going to scrape off these little areas just here and see if that gives me enough clearance. I just cleaned up where this will go into the headstock, so let's just put that on. Okay, so front nose cone, supporting brackets and headlight bracket all mounted. 2 bolts that go through there, and they're tightened to 26 Newton meters. What I also did, just while I was off camera, is I just quickly fitted these as well. So there's only one little 8mm bolt that goes in to hold the brackets on, and then same again for the ignition coil. So that's all mounted, and the fairing stays are in there as well, which again 6mm bolt, and then a fresh new rubber well nut. So we are now starting to be a little bit front end heavy. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick on the rear swinging arm so that we can add a bit of weight to the bike, and then I'm going to start putting some of the plastics, the ECU, and then lay the loom on so that we can start getting the loom into place on the bike. Okay, so swing arm is here. It's been painted and it's not come up too bad. I didn't know whether to get it powder coated or not, but I might do that at a later date. We'll see how this paint fares up. It seems to be okay at the moment. So if you remember, I put brand new bearings into the back of the engine case where the swing arm needs to mount, so I'm just going to grease these up first. That's only a case of sticking some grease in there and just working it into the bearings, and I'll do that off camera because it's going to be a bit messy. Okay, bearings are greased up. What we've got to do then, put the swing arm into place and then knock the spindle through, and then on each side we've got a shim washer and a washer that also needs to go on each side of the engine. Sorry, that way around, so the shim on the inside. Let's pop this on. Just need to fit the little snap ring on the other side of the swing arm. So similar to what we've got on this side of the swing arm, just going to put that on. What I've just done here is I've pivoted up the swing arm so I can get into the pinch bolts to do them up properly. So these got to be done to 43 Newton meters, so I'm just going to do that now. Next off, I want to stick the suspension rocker arm in. So that's all been cleaned out and the bearings greased. So that gets mounted across here. So what I'm just going to do is just check that it fits with the bits of paint that are on there before we proceed any further. Right, we need to tighten the suspension pivot bolt to 73 Newton meters. So 19mm spanner to hold the nut at this end, and then I'll tighten the bolt through the center. Sorry, I got carried away myself and didn't film that, so there was a little bit of an interference fit to get the adjustment rod into the seat there, but it's in, bolts in loose. Shock's not in at the moment because I've got an Olin shock that needs to go away to be cleaned up and rebuilt because I don't have the equipment I need at the moment. Right, what I'm going to just do is put the little plastic covers on, which simply go on just like that. I'll do the one on the other side. Okay, I just rested in the rear wheel spindle just to see what it would look like. Adds a bit of extra weight to the back of the bike as well. What I'm going to do now is put the oil breather box in. So this is it here. The hose that goes to the airbox is damaged, so I need to source one of those, which I still haven't managed to get yet. Okay, stepped outside the garage because it's nice here. So just need to rebuild the tail unit mudguard assembly. So this makes up with the rear light sitting in there, and then the license plate holder goes underneath. So just going to stick that together quickly so we can chuck that on the bike. Okay, now it's back together. Let's stick that back on the bike. And we also need to put the spacer piece so the spacer piece just goes in the back there, so that when we put the grab handle on, it acts as the spacer between the under tray and the actual frame. Okay, next piece to do is I'm going to get the loom sat on the bike. So the next piece I want to do is I want to get the loom onto the bike. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to roughly lay it on where I think it's got to go, and we'll work out how it runs through the bike. So I've got the manual to make sure I follow the same route as was done at the factory. Okay, let's just stick the loom on. Okay, so rear end electrics are in for the moment. So I've got just the indicator connections lying loose. There's also a little loom that goes in, down, through here for the number plate light and the rear light. So I just need to connect that up. Then I've just tied it out of the way on the frame but I need to check whether it comes underneath there or not, but I doubt it because the exhaust goes there, so I think I've got the right route in there. I'm going to check in the manual, and then it just rests on here. The piece I want to do correctly here is just make sure that I route all of these major pieces and connections the right way through the engine so that I don't have any problems with that. Okay, so let me grab the manual and we'll work out which way to run these wires. Okay, so updating where we've got to the loom. So I've tie wrapped the loom on top of the loom carrier on top of the vertical head. Then you'll see it comes and splits. We've got one side that goes down and inside the frame, and that's for the battery side. Then on here we've got another thread that goes across the top on the inside of the tube, and that will be the connector for the forward part of the loom that forms all part of the head fairing, and it also connects the radiator and the coil on, I think this is the vertical coil on this side. Then there's another tail that comes down in here and connects to the 2 water temperature sensors, the ignition pickup, and then there's a plug that will go down for the stand. What I'm just doing on this side at the moment is working out where these bits of the loom go. So you've got the regulator rectifier that sits inside the air scoop, so that comes up the back of the water tank, which is going to sit in just here. So I'm just trying to suss out, because this gets tied along the water pipe that sits on the base. So I'm just trying to work out how much play I've got on that. So what I'm going to do quickly is fit in the water tank and just see where that leaves us. So let's just quickly do that. Okay, so you can see that the regulator rectifier goes back behind the water tube, behind the water reservoir. There was a P clip here, which for the life of me I can't remember what, so I'm just going to have to check back on my old videos. I've got to connect up the hose, but I'm short of one Jubilee clip. I seem to be running out of stuff very quickly on here. And then you can see the detail here of where the loom has come down. So this will all be getting secured up here once I'm comfortable with where everything's going. And then I've got the other side of the regulator rectifier that needs to come up. That will come up. That's the charging lead from the generator, which is currently sat across the top of the engine. And the battery box will go here, but because I'm currently on the stand I can't put that on, and that's where the main fuse connects, the starter connection to the positive terminal, connection to the negative terminal. I've connected up the oil pressure sensor, and you may or not be able to see that, but just behind here is the neutral indicator, and this will be the plug for the brake switch on the rear brake. Okay, so let me just play around again off camera and work out where I'm connecting these little bits and pieces in and see what we can make some sense of. So off camera I've put the airbox on the bike. The reason for that was I needed to get the ignition switch in place so I could just work out where its cabling ran, and this was such a difficult thing to fit that I just persevered with it and got it on. The challenge was getting the rubber for the vertical throttle on. Necessitated all sorts of jiggery-pokery. I'm not entirely sure which order you have to put the airbox and the throttles on, whether you put the throttles on with the airbox and mount them to the engine, or separately as I did. But the challenge is clearance between the front of the airbox and the ignition mount. So it didn't seem a very easy way of actually getting the throttles on, the airbox onto the throttles, but I don't think it would be any easier with the throttles separately, because they were incredibly difficult to put into their manifolds as it was anyway. So what I did is I effectively left that rubber for the airbox on the throttle, pushed the airbox on and then worked it into the airbox, and I was able to leave that one in place. This hole here is for the air breather tube that I've got that's damaged, so I will get that resolved. And there is a hole there for the drain tube that I'll put that on in a second. And the reason behind that is I needed to get this connection put into the bike, and that needed to run its route via down in between the air intakes, and I'm just going to put it into that rubber strap. But I've sort of sussed this out now. So the P-clip, when I looked on the video when I stripped the bike down, is where the regulator rectifier went. So you've got the main lead to the battery, the lead from the alternator. They'll tie wrap onto this water pipe here. Then I've got a few connections just to make up that go with the front loom, and then as we discussed, the battery box needs to go on there. So not bad. Okay, starting to come together quite well. My riv nuts have now turned up, so I'm gonna put a new riv nut into there so I can mount the hugger. So the hugger is cleaned up quite nice, but that'll go into there once I've done that. But I might leave it off until I've got the shock done, so which hopefully I'm going to get sorted out tomorrow. So I think I'm going to call it a wrap for this video here, because I'm just conscious I need to get the content out. So still plenty left to do. Got to get all the controls on, the pannier mounts. Still got to fit chain sprocket, the wheels, clutch slave cylinder. Got to get the front controls on, so handlebars, brake levers, throttle, clutch lever. Got to do the front part of the loom still, so there's still plenty to get on with, but I think you'd agree that we're starting to get somewhere, and it's looking really, really good. I'm really impressed with how nice the bike is looking, when you think that this isn't aimed at a concours restoration. This was just to bring the bike to an acceptable standard for me to use as my personal riding bike. So I'm really chuffed with that. Cool. Okay, hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, chuck us a like, because it helps the algorithm. Any questions or comments, then please leave them down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And if you're not a subscriber to the channel, hit that subscribe button and notification bell for more content. There's plenty more to come. See you on the next video then. Cheers and bye.